You need the NBA, of course. We're going to bring that heat for you. I'm Donnie Rightside, along with Davis Mattek. We're going to welcome in Bryan Fonseca here from the Action Network. Big doings around the NBA. But before we get there, Bryan, how you feeling this morning on a Thursday?
I traded for Karl-Anthony Towns last week, and he is out of the rest of the fantasy playoffs. And more importantly, he might be out for the rest of the season, according to a couple reports. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that.
Let's get right into that, Bryan, because that news popped up just a few short minutes ago here. Karl-Anthony Towns forward here for the Minnesota Timberwolves, a torn meniscus, no timetable on return. This is one of those teams battling for the top seed overall in the Western Conference. Talk to us here about the ramifications, Bryan, of no Karl-Anthony Towns for the foreseeable future here for the T-Wolves.
Yeah, so in actual basketball, this sucks because they're tied for the 1 seed right now with the Oklahoma City Thunder, who now have a clear path to getting that 1 seed, unless, Denver's also right there, and Denver's Denver. We trust them. We saw them, proof of concept. They won the championship last year. But with the Minnesota Timberwolves, we already have questions about this team for a number of different reasons. Karl-Anthony Towns is actually one of those questions that we're not sure we're going to get an answer to at this point. Torn meniscus could often be 2 to 3 months, maybe even longer than that, especially if you're about 7 feet tall. And right now, it's the first week of March, and putting him out for a couple of months means he would miss the first round of the playoffs. He might miss the second round of the playoffs. And I don't know about you, I wasn't sure Minnesota was going to get that far into the playoffs anyway. We already had questions about their fourth quarter offense. He's part of that too. So now Naz Reid is going to soak up the majority of these minutes. A lot of people love Naz Reid because he's one of these guys that he feels like he's underrated. And then when you watch him play, it's like, oh, he's really good, but there's a reason why he's in this role and not in the Karl-Anthony Towns role. There's a reason why they haven't traded Karl-Anthony Towns, and it's like, hey, let's just move Naz Reid to the 4. And there's a reason why he accepted the extension that they gave him, despite the fact that he probably could have started elsewhere. So all that being said, Minnesota may also be in a first-round series where they have to play the Suns, the Mavericks, the Lakers, the Warriors. And if that's going to happen, a lot of people are going to be taking the other side because Karl-Anthony Towns is not there. So this is huge, massive in terms of tilting the power balance in the Western Conference.
It is absolutely massive. I think really because that double big lineup, the 2 7-footer lineup, is really not great for the Denver Nuggets specifically. It was probably the hardest matchup of any seed in the other, the other top 4 teams, the Thunder, the Clippers, and the Timberwolves. Like the Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns matchup, more difficult for Denver because it forced, one, they couldn't really play Aaron Gordon as their backup center, which has been their best lineup in the playoffs. They probably would have to play DeAndre Jordan or Zeke Naji some minutes in the playoffs, which they really would prefer not to do. But obviously, it's just like Jokic, there's nothing you can really do against him. But if you limit his ability as a rebounder, both on offense and on defense, and you just always have a hand in his face, you can limit him, ever so slightly. And so now going to the Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert front court, having to play Kyle Anderson some minutes at power forward, it's just going to be much tougher sledding for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And speaking of the aforementioned Denver Nuggets, we've got what I think probably is the most likely preview of the NBA Finals. These teams have already played once in the regular season, and Denver smoked them. Boston Celtics versus the Denver Nuggets. We again have a very, very small spread here. The Celtics are 48-13. The Nuggets are 42-20. The Celtics are all the way up to minus 125 to win the conference, plus 210 to win the championship. I mean, look, I would really be fading that number. No team in the NBA this far out should be plus 230 to win the championship. But Nuggets, Celtics tonight, do you think that this is a bettable number one way or the other? -1, +1, that'll probably switch for most of the day. Bryan, what do you make of this regular season matchup between the two?
I'd probably lean Denver at home because it's Denver at home and because, I think Boston's been great during the regular season. We could talk about their playoff projections at some point because I have some thoughts on that. But I think with the Denver Nuggets, they're a safe bet at home, generally speaking. This is a 1-point spread, so I would just look at the money line anyway. I hate when basketball spreads are like 3 or under because, when it gets to that point, it's like if I'm betting someone plus 2.5, plus 3, I might as well pick them to win the game. I like Denver just in general. I don't like some of the things that they've sort of demonstrated during the regular season. Their ATS numbers haven't been great. Their ATS numbers in general, but also, on the road, there's been some struggles. But here at home against Boston, I like this spot for them. They should take care of business. They're back at the crib. And Nikola Jokic has been playing, has sort of been ramping up to his playoff self as well. So I do think that they're going to get this one.
Brian, taking a look here at the NBA championship odds at the FanDuel Sportsbook. You take a look at the Boston Celtics at a plus 210 price, the clear favorites here, followed by the Denver Nuggets at a plus 420. It's easy to say, yes, Boston's the best team in the East and maybe the Denver Nuggets the best in the West. Are there any teams a little bit down that leaderboard here, at least the market, that you might be lining up and saying, you know what, I'll take a flyer on the Phoenix Suns, OKC, maybe even the Miami Heat at this point? Are there any dogs here at some of these prices that you say, you know what, I might want to look at these?
Yeah, probably those two teams at plus 3,200, the Heat and the Mavericks. Those are the ones that I've been sort of looking at as long shots. The Mavericks, not great as of late, but I did like them coming out of the trade deadline, walking away with Daniel Gafford in particular, and also PJ Washington. But I do think that they're interesting because they can make a run. Their schedule is really soft. If you look at it, they have one of the 7 or 8 softer schedules in the NBA for the rest of the season. Then they have Luka Doncic, who I think should be an MVP candidate and on every ballot possible. I think he could even be the MVP this year, depending on how the last several months shake out. And then with the Heat, the biggest difference to me is that they fixed their fourth quarter problem, as I tweeted out yesterday. Their point differential in the fourth quarter, the last 11 fourth quarters that they played, they're plus 47, and they're 10-1 in these fourth quarters. Before that, they were 18-32 and minus 87 or something along those lines. They were one of the worst fourth quarter teams in basketball. Lately, they've been one of the best. And all I've said about that team this season is if they figure out the fourth quarter stuff, then they'll be able to get clicking. So I think you have to look at them, especially more so than the Mavericks, because the Western Conference has a little bit more clutter in it. Whereas in the Eastern Conference, they're kind of Boston's kryptonite, and Boston is a heavy favorite. But as we saw against the Cavs, maybe they're also front runners. And sometimes when you're whooping everybody during the regular season, it doesn't really benefit you that much in the playoffs because you have to play more close games. And we've sort of seen this backfire on this team in particular. So if you're looking at their rivals in the Eastern Conference, the Knicks are another team that I would be interested in if they were healthy. But now I have questions about, because we don't have a real update on Julius Randle. OG Anunoby is supposed to be back at some point, but it looks like there's going to be too much around the injury front for me to take them seriously in terms of contenders. And the Heat have done it before multiple times in the last 4 years. They're the team that I'd probably look at in the East as a long shot if you want to sort of fade Boston and fade Milwaukee for that matter.
What do you think is going to happen to Oklahoma City's title odds as a result of this Minnesota issue? Because the Clippers right now are in the middle of a pretty bad run. They have lost 6 of their last 11 games. Obviously, the Wolves and the Thunder have kind of been battling it out for the 1 seed for most of this time. We see right now the Thunder are 20-1. They're actually behind the Suns in the NBA championship odds in the market. I'm going to guess getting up to the 1 seed. And weirdly enough, the fact that the Warriors might not be a play-in team actually should make the 1 seed a little bit more appealing. I think kind of funny how that is going to end up working. Obviously, the reason why no one wants to pick the Thunder is they're the second youngest team in the NBA, but it does feel like things are kind of opening up for them at the top of the Western Conference.
Yeah, I don't want to pick them either, but I think their odds should drop a little bit. I don't think that Phoenix should have shorter odds than them. I get why they are, but that team, I mean, Grayson Allen's your 4th best player, and you're not going to convince me. I don't care if you have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. If Grayson Allen is leading your sort of others on that team, then I'm not going to take you seriously as a title contender because it tells me a lot of things, one of which is you can't defend down the stretch of games, and another is that you're too small. And these are one of the teams that, like Denver, if they see Phoenix in the playoffs, for example, Denver's just going to absolutely tear through them. I think Oklahoma City could beat them in a series as well. And I think as it relates to the Thunder, I like them a lot, but I do think that, as we've seen historically in the NBA, you kind of got to get whooped before you make it all the way to the finals or make it even to the conference finals. I think the conference finals is where I would cap them, but I would still, to me, the Western Conference is still Denver or nothing at this point. And I mentioned Dallas as a potential long shot, though I can't really sit here and convince you why Dallas is all of a sudden going to make a run unless they make another sort of put together another winning streak like they did recently before they got on the skid. So I think to me, it's Denver and nothing in the Western Conference right now because I'm not a believer in the Clippers like that. James Harden in the playoffs, Paul George, the health stuff, Kawhi Leonard, the health stuff. And you have Russell Westbrook, who's injured right now, who I'm not particularly that big of a fan of anyway. So the Clippers are a team that I've been looking to fade. Right now, for the Western Conference, for me, it's really Denver or nothing as it relates to who's going to get to the finals.
Best game on the board tonight, as we talked about, the Celtics and the Nuggets. Another intriguing matchup tonight, 7:30 p.m. tip time Eastern. That's the Miami Heat and the Dallas Mavericks tonight. The FanDuel Sportsbook opened this game here, Brian, at a 4.5-point favorite towards the Dallas Mavericks, still sitting at that 4.5-point favorite, and a total tonight of 229.5. Heat Mavericks in your eyes tonight. What are we looking at, Brian?
Well, the sharp side from what I looked at this morning was actually on the Heat to cover. I kind of like that. I don't know who's going to win this game. I could see it coming down to the last possession. On the player prop side, I did take Jimmy Butler this morning over 34.5 points, rebounds, and assists. He's been over that number 10 of his last 12 games. And this was a number that the over-under was around 30 until this recent stretch where he started taking basketball more seriously over the last month or so. So I think Jimmy Butler PRA over 34.5 is what I like the most in this game so far. Some of the other props are very tricky to look at and in terms of assessing what's actually going to happen. And in terms of the game, yeah, I think this is going to be a close one. I would lean Miami to cover. I wouldn't make that a full-blown pick. I do think that Dallas could win this game, and they kind of need to sort of snap out of this little rut that they're on right now. Miami's been absolutely rolling as of late. So I would lean in their direction because they're also a better road team than they are at home. And that's been the case again this season.
Yeah, real quick before we get out of here, 32-1 title odds for the team that made the finals last season, popping out of the play-in. It feels like if you want to bet the Heat any given year, you just wait for them to settle as the 7th seed, and then you just bet on them to win the championship when they're at their lowest point.
They're the Pittsburgh Steelers of the NBA. Like, they're just a team that you could just bet on all the time. Mike Tomlin, Eric Spoelstra, they're kind of one and the same. Like, they're sort of one of the safer plays in terms of organizational stability and in terms of just what you can bank on, what you're going to get from a night-to-night basis, specifically at this point of the season. This is less so the case early on, but late in the year, they're going to come off from dead and terrorize other teams in the Eastern Conference. And right now, there's 6, but there's a pathway for them to get to 4, and they have the third easiest strength of schedule the rest of the season. Now, Orlando has the easiest, and they're 4 right now, but I think we would all favor the Heat over the Magic in a potential playoff series right now.
Fantastic information from Bryan Fonseca, the Action Network. Thanks for joining us this morning. Fade the public poll coming up next. Don't go anywhere. It's the Early Line.